Hey, I'm Nick,
And I'm Graeme.
and this is the Dude, Where's My Code podcast. This is episode 6, I believe. And today, Graeme and I were getting into just having a conversation about sort of the state of tech right now. Kind of everywhere you're looking and reading and hearing, there's a lot of talk about layoffs or really difficult times. And as we started talking, we were kind of exploring, like, as managers and in leadership positions, like how do we lean into trying to help in uncertain times and kind of bring some clarity and just really navigate that with people on our teams.
As managers, it's definitely a difficult time. It's difficult for everyone, I will acknowledge. But as a manager, you're trying to navigate that uncertainty, that ambiguity, bring the team together, rally, keep that level of trust and engagement up, while probably struggling yourself with the uncertainty and some of the concerning things taking place. So you have to kind of compartmentalize. I don't know if that's the right thing. And but also, as we got into the conversation about transparency, be willing to show, right, that the right amount of, hey, I'm not sure either. Let's figure this out together, and that's okay. Managers don't have to be perfect and 100% on all the time,
Right, and I think that was probably a core part of what we got into, was really like this balance and trying to just lean into what we would in general consider our good, leadership practices, characteristics, behaviors, and how you might apply that. So the conversation certainly focused or started, I suppose, around like layoffs and uncertainty, and kind of just progressed into some of these general skills. So hope you enjoy it.
And some technical problems along the way.
Yeah, but that's hopefully something that will happen from time to time, so not so bad. But hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
I mean, I have no advice for not getting laid off because you have no control over that. I think it's important for people to know, it's not it's not reflective of them. I think that's like a message that is occasionally shared, but it's hella important for people to know, you were part of a layoff. That shouldn't affect your professional self-worth.
Yeah, there's I saw someone posted a comment about something, and one of the guys that was in a comment response that was laid off is some C# guru that
I saw this. Yeah, he's really well known on Stack Overflow. He's got some of the best answers out there.
Yeah, and I was like, what? It's amazing. In the comment, he was like, it's something about the hypocrisy or it being idiotic or whatever. He's working on a team that literally looks at performance and cost savings. Mm-hmm. And I know his name, not from where he works, but just I thought he was at Microsoft, but I guess he went to Apple or something. Just insane that it's obviously that person is extremely talented, has done extremely well in their career, and it's just
right.
It's bonkers, but
yeah. I mean, maybe that leads into, maybe it leads into leading with compassion. I don't know. These layoffs get me really uncomfortable because I'm not high enough to be in charge, right? And I don't run these companies, but I've long believed that there's got to be alternatives to laying people off. There's a lot of use cases of companies that have done really well by not laying people off and finding alternative ways for people to rally together and investing in their people. So it's I really resonate with those stories, and then I see these big companies doing these layoffs, and it's it's really rattling because I hate that, right? I mean, if you really break it down, especially right now, the economy is taking a turn, but people took a lot of money and really inflated valuations of companies and then turned that around into like hyper growth where people grew not necessarily for their needs, right, but for like a future trajectory that on the trajectory they're on.
Right.
And so they hire all these people, and then it's like, oh, we kind of screwed up. You know, we've overhired, we've overspent, and there's a looming economic crisis coming. So like we need to cut costs, and that's cutting people. So we're going to lay off a whole bunch of people who have visas that they have to be working to fulfill visa requirements, or like have families and mortgages to pay. And it's late November, and traditionally not a lot of hiring even happens between November and January.
Right.
Like companies don't hire then. So now it's like you just look at the position it puts people in, and it's like leading into Christmas holidays, right? Like no job, probably not a lot of prospects because not a lot of companies are doing at least like active hiring from their pipeline. I think there's some like stat, I forget what it is. It's like if you're not into the interview process by like November 15th or something, like you're not going to get hired before the new year. Like that's just not on the table. So anyway, that all bothers me. And I think about, even when we're not talking about mass layoffs, but we're just talking about on like individual levels, right? It's the same idea of like cutting people loose, you know, before making an active coaching investment in them, right? And trying to turn people around. It's like these kinds of cultures where it's like, well, we don't want to invest in this person any longer because they've been a performance problem. And for me, it's like, well, but you already have invested a lot in them and they're like part of the team. And so if someone's performance drops, like my first reaction, let's say I go into a one-on-one, my first is like, hey, you know, what's happening? What's going on? Is something wrong? Because like you used to be performing at this level and now you're not. If they weren't always a low performer.
So that's a good point you made too, right? About it being a performance drop, like something that you recognize that someone's operating at level X and now there's something below X, however you measure that, right? But that's kind of...
For sure. I mean, if you have someone, if you have someone who is a low performer, you need to reflect upon your hiring and onboarding practices, your expectations. There's a lot of stuff to reflect on, right? But yeah, it's a different conversation than, hey, like you've been performing and now you're not. It seems like some places have this culture of, oh, this person's getting worse. They got to go, right? And it's like, I don't get that. I really struggle with that because like I said, my default is what's going on, what's wrong. Maybe something's going on at home that's affecting their performance. Maybe we're not motivating them. We took them off a project that they were excited about, or removed opportunities that had been on the table, or whatever. Right. And we haven't talked about it. Seems unfair. I don't know.
Yeah, I can totally subscribe to that, I think. Yeah, and then it's like, it's tricky, right? Because I think like as like middle managers kind of thing, like when you're dealing with individual contributors and like the front line of your staff in a company, like I feel like if you're doing a good job as a manager, you're kind of trying to be in tune with the people, understanding like obviously how they're trying to grow in their career, like their, you know, the projects and stuff they're working on, but also like I kind of think that to do a really good job, you need like that high level of trust, and it does involve like, you know, like not everyone's going to feel like a family member, your best friend, but like you gotta reach a little bit, and it puts like people like us, I guess, as managers into a really weird spot where it's like, if you're sitting so far back from the frontline staff and you're strictly looking at numbers and like you've totally dehumanized the entire company, like you're just looking for spots where you can move numbers around to make numbers work, and it's a shit thing because that ends up somehow getting translated into managers having conversations, or like managers being part of the conversations where they're also let go just because like this entire section of people it's just no longer it's just chopped at some level within the org. That's like, I don't know, it's bizarre. It's really bizarre to think about like that discrepancy between what I feel is doing a good job managing and leading people, where you have to have like a solid relationship with those people versus like, hey, it's just numbers on a spreadsheet somewhere, like gone.
Hmm. Yeah, it's odd that it's just numbers on a spreadsheet when it comes to cost savings.
Right.
But when a company is on the upswing, it's the kind of people in the org that make it. So
Yeah.
we want to hire the best people, right? We want to build a strong culture. We want engaged employees, passionate about the mission. And then, oh, we need to cut costs. Well, these are just salaries,
Yeah.
not people that helped get us where we are today.
And if you think about the level, well, usually what I hear, the level of investment that goes into getting the right people, you hear that time and time again. It's like it's all about having the right people. Um, I know that that's like you hear that a lot for startups, but like, and I agree with it, but I mean, I would assume the same thing applies to like any level, any scale of business is like you want the right people. Um, so it's super interesting that so much effort goes into getting the right people. You'd be willing to pay more. Like that's why people are negotiating, salaries and stuff. Like you want the right people. Now it's time to save money, and now it's like the right people part doesn't matter. It's like the areas, like the business areas that you're just gonna axe. It's weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that is one of the things I've been thinking about when I read about these layoffs. I'm not at an organization currently big enough to make the news or be trending on social media. If we were, now we haven't lost anybody because we're very small and we don't need to make cuts like that. But I am thinking about the managers. I mean, many managers have been let go, but I'm thinking about the managers who have to have their team members. I guess, I don't know, maybe not a lot of managers are actually involved in the letting go process. It seems like for a lot of these bigger companies, you're getting emails, HR is reaching out. Like,
that's what it looks like. Yeah. Like
so
I don't know, but that's kind of how it seems when I read about this stuff going on.
So my original question was going to be, how does a manager like do that with, empathy and compassion and understanding? But maybe the chances are they're not doing that. And so then the question is, what do the remaining managers do with the remaining team members to rebuild trust, establish kind of compassion for their situation and like for what everyone's been through?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a really good question, right? Because like I can't speak to that necessarily from experience, like certainly not from the perspective of like jobs being cut. The only kind of experience I have with that is just like teams kind of being in particular circumstances that like maybe don't feel ideal, like they're going through some change and then like that's uncomfortable, and helping, like understanding leading with compassion for that situation where people are like, we know this isn't a good feeling, like it's not a good situation, can't fix it instantly, but like let's work through it. But
Mm-hmm.
not, I think the job cut thing is like it's a whole different level of uncertainty that comes with that, where people are like, am I like, should I be waiting for next week to see like if I'm cut from here, like when does it stop, like all of your safety is just evaporated, right? So how do you possibly restore that?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and like I don't, like I could probably talk about how I think I would try to navigate that. And I think for me, honestly, it comes down to just being as transparent as I possibly can, right? Like, which is tricky, because I think about, I don't know, when we talk about leadership and management in general, I think there's something to be said about having, you probably heard, like having a united front across management or whatever, so that you're not like, I don't know, like basically what's the word, like like not circumventing, but you're
Well,
making it
you don't want to undermine,
undermine. That's
right?
it.
Like, yeah, leadership
Yeah,
decisions,
exactly.
directions.
So how do you like if you don't agree, and that's part of, like this happens a lot, right? You don't agree with something that's in leadership, but you need to maintain that united front so you're not undermining, but also like trying to instill confidence and you know that's like a tricky battle.
Yeah, it can be tough. Obviously, we we talked in some of my previous roles about the concept of disagree and commit, right? So I don't agree with this, but I recognize that I have said my piece, right? Tried to make a justification, whatever, done whatever I think I can or need to, and at some point you have to recognize like it's not a battle to have,
Right.
and you need to have leverage and use the trust that you have in your leadership, your manager, right, your leaders above you to be like, okay, even if I don't agree with this, it's gotta happen. So that's fine. Then you can say, okay, I recognize this. Yeah, but how do you translate that to your team?
Because I don't think you necessarily want to lean super hard into like, yeah, so and so above me, like totally like bullshit what they're saying. I don't agree with it, but I also said we'd go ahead and do it. Like, because then that leaves people, I think, going like, wait, like if we follow you, like, or if we follow leadership above you, like it's gonna displease you, it seems. But if we kind of align with you, then we're not aligning with like more senior leadership. Like it's a weird spot. So but I try to find a balance too where I'm like I do want to I don't know like try to find a way to let people know like something might be uncomfortable because of the decision that's been made, or maybe something wasn't not my first choice, but like I see the value this way, so I try to I don't know introduce some level of like here's my opinion at least. Like I don't know how to explain that properly, but
Yeah, stick to facts is a good one, right? Try not to inject too much personal narrative or opinion into it. My personal portfolio has a quote that I wrote that just says, I won't withhold information from you unless there's an HR or a legal reason to. So that's always on the back of my mind. If someone asks, I'm going to share what I can share safely. But that doesn't mean opinions and narrative, right? So it can be like, yeah, we're going to try to run this experiment, and like, I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but whatever leadership feels like going this direction might increase revenue, which is one of our OKRs that we're trying to tackle. So,
right.
We're going to run the experiment. And the good news is, like, because we operate from a growth mindset, we will run the experiment. If it has the outcomes we want, fantastic, right? If it doesn't, then that's fine. That's not on us, because it's not something we proposed. We're just being asked to do, or whatever. Stuff that I've certainly had to say before. It does get tricky. I had to issue like a comp adjustment for somebody once, and I didn't agree with it. And that was a tough conversation because it was really supposed to be like celebrated. But I really felt like this person was getting kind of mistreated. And I had to navigate the conversation of like, you're getting this increase, right? It's a good thing. It's also kind of the bare minimum. Like you deserve more. How do you like, that's a fun one as a manager. But I really think our job is to like lead and grow the people on our teams, grow and coach the people on our teams, right? So sometimes it might be okay to demonstrate that you're not always comfortable with everything as a manager. So they don't always have to be comfortable with everything as an IC either,
Right.
but develop the right tools for how to handle that.
That's a super interesting way to put it, I think, because you said kind of two things that I don't know if I've like necessarily like made concrete for myself, but you mentioned that idea that you keep in your personal portfolio that's like not withholding information basically unless it's legal or HR reasons. Um, like that I totally subscribe to that. And the other part is like kind of something about being genuine, right? Um, it's funny because I don't not because I don't like him or anything, but I haven't really, followed a lot of like Gary V for whatever reason. And more recently, I probably just because of the YouTube algorithm or something, I watched a video and now it's the only thing that comes up. But he was talking about something for like a marketing perspective and like speaking, and I thought that it was super cool because I saw it like in how I try to manage, I guess. And he was talking about um, he was saying if you're trying to produce content, you're trying to market to an audience or something, if you're like not if you're trying to be someone else because you're like trying to be like Gary Vee and you're like just not that personality and stuff, but you think that's what you have to do to be successful because that's what he's doing. He's like, you've already failed. And he talked about how when he started speaking, he would curse a lot and like he'd go on in like jeans and a t-shirt or whatever, like not in a suit. And I don't know, like I curse a ton. But I also try to like I'm not doing it just to be rude or something. I'm just like I'm trying to it's just how I am. Like I'm just kind of being me. And I was thinking about like it I noticed that when I start really having like a good trust relationship with people on my team or people that I work with, like little things like the cursing starts to pick up a little bit more. Like I have this more natural, like I just start to be more me. And that kind of comes with this idea of, being transparent, letting people know, like if I'm not trying to say I'm comfortable all the time. We talk about fail like from before, right? Like, if I didn't do something right, being transparent about that thing I did that wasn't right, what I was learning from it, like the fact that I can be wrong, I am wrong a bunch, but just that whole being, be yourself and kind of lean into that when you're leading, I think is super helpful for building trust.
Being a fallible leader, right? A former boss of mine described management as being a bit of an ambiguity sponge, which I always think is a really funny analogy to try and use. But when you really think about it, I mean, sponges are a little gross to visualize, but they give a lot of information coming in that you're really just trying to absorb for the team, right? And then I was going to say excrete, but I don't think I like that word. Just like release in a more focused manner for the team, right? And so that's for me, that's where I build that concept of being able to be transparent by demonstrating to the team, listen, like if I'm not telling you something, it's not because I'm hiding it. It's because I'm trying to give you clarity, reduce distractions. But if you want to know, I'll tell you. And sometimes we use one-on-ones to tweak and tune how much information. Different individuals do better with more or less. And so tuning that kind of like ambiguity absorption for individuals, and then also figuring out what the baseline is for the team, what you share in your team meetings and whatever has worked really well for me. So, hey, there's a lot of uncertainty about, it could be anything. Uncertainty about this new feature we're building or our revenue or like whatever, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
If there's ambiguity coming from the rest of the org, and it can be something as specific as like ambiguous requirements for the thing you're being asked to build, right? Ambiguous priorities from product happens all the time, and all of it is the same. It's, hey, I'll take it. I'll take the team work with them, try and give the right amount of information to move us forward, and kind of like the rest is a distraction. Like if we have goals and OKRs to hit, if the organization isn't hitting its revenue goals, is that really relevant to what we're trying to do right now? Like maybe, probably not. So do I need to be talking a lot about the state of our revenue? No. But if someone says, hey, how are our sales doing? Maybe they're not doing great. And we can talk about that. And then we can talk about what we can do to help. And usually it's what we can do to help is like do the thing we're supposed to be doing usually.
Right.
So again, knowing didn't really change anything. So I try to build that with the team a lot.
That's a cool example. Yeah. And I like the kind of the two things you mentioned there that I feel like are very common scenarios for things being ambiguous, right? Like priorities and like and features, like how like maybe how something's supposed to be implemented or just different constraints around it. Like it's like two very, very common things. Of course, you know, anyone that would listen or watch might say like, you know, shouldn't that be something that is like sorted out all the time? And like, yeah, I mean, that's the goal, is that that's the case, right? But there's going to be situations where it's like, again, if you're thinking about metrics and if you use OKRs, sometimes it's like we want thing X to go from value A to value B. Okay, maybe that's clear, but how you do that, now you have to start talking about the features or the changes and stuff. So like, yeah, it could be totally ambiguous about how you go solve that, but you know, that's why the teams kind of rally together behind picking the work that's associated with those KRs. But yeah, I thought that was really cool because I think those are two very common things that come up. And like as managers, yeah, we have to help navigate that. And for those two as well, there's other roles we can lean on often, which would be like project managers or product managers and that kind of stuff. Program managers, some type of P and M acronym to help facilitate that. But yeah.
My favorite is, I don't know, what do you think we should do? As a manager is a really fun one to use. Like, yeah, what's our priority? I don't know. What do you think is more important and why? I like showing that's what I'm doing as a manager, is I'm taking the heuristics that I've learned and the parameters that the company provides to us, and I'm making a decision, and it's not always going to be right. And generally I want teams input on these decisions. And so showing them that that's the process, it helps let them in, right? Like that's the transparency. What's the priority? I don't know. Which one of these is going to be faster to build? Which one of these drives an OKR for our team potentially further, do we think? Like, let's talk about it.
It's really interesting that you said that too, because I don't know, a few months back or so, I had like mandatory engineering manager coaching training, and it's funny because some of the training that we get at Microsoft, I think when people hear about, oh, you have to go do some, you know, mandatory online courses and whatever, I certainly felt this way. Like, okay, I have to go do something like how much can I tune out and just like click through just to check the box? Because like so much of this stuff feels like it's kind of junk. And I'm not just saying this because I'm trying to impress someone at Microsoft, but I genuinely feel like a lot of the manager training we get it's like pretty interesting. And so it makes it easy to kind of be like, oh, cool, we have training. Like I have other work I have to do, but I know I'm going to learn something. And in this coaching training, one of the techniques this guy was talking about using was like basically just asking questions back to people. So when you said like, hey, like I don't know what the priority is, like what do you think? It's this really cool coaching tool because like people, I almost feel like it's like rubber ducking when you're like programming, like people usually can figure things out, right? They just start talking about it, and then all of a sudden, like, they're exploring and like they're just on a roll. It's really neat.
You're giving away the secrets. Don't give away all the secrets.
And he framed it in this coaching stuff that was like, it was really funny the way he put it. He was like, priority number one, he's like, be lazy. And you hear it and you're like, what? Because obviously, like, you're not thinking about being lazy to be like a high performing manager or coach. And he's like, no, like the lazy thing is like, you're not the one trying to solve all the problems. It's like,
yeah, don't be quick to solution.
yeah. And it was like, I don't know, this training, at least for me, was like, ask people back more things and basically shut your mouth because you talk too much. Let people do the solutioning and the talking, and you sit there and ask questions. So anyway, just wanted to bring that up because I thought it was cool.
We did a similar one, and they gave us a cheat sheet of questions that fall into different categories and types of questions you can ask. And we had to do a lot of, it was an in-person virtual training. And we had to kind of pair off and do scenarios. And I was kind of in the similar boat. I was looking through this, like we had like mock situations, and I'm looking through this question sheet and like asking questions. And at the end, we were debriefing. My partner, I think it was one of our VPs, was like, just everything you asked sounded so forced. Like it just didn't sound natural. And I was like, yeah, it's friggin' hard, man. Like it's hard. So I spent a lot of time going through this cheat sheet and not memorizing the questions, but internalizing what they're trying to accomplish. Right. And trying to train for it to feel more natural and not like, how do I take these questions and make them feel natural, but more like, what are the things I need to practice and learn so that I treat conversations as like exploratory and naturally being able to figure out what questions do I need to ask this individual for us to together uncover, where we want to arrive.
Right.
So I did something similar.
That's funny. Yeah. I don't know. It's a really tricky thing. And I think it takes some reflecting to realize that you do it. But it's probably, I assume it's a very common thing for managers or in general. Like, I don't want to say like managers are the high performers. That's not what I'm trying to convey. But for people that are, like generally managers are more senior people. But even for like more senior ICs and stuff, you're used to being in a position where you are the one offering up solutions and helping drive stuff. But being able to take a bit of a back seat on that sometimes is interesting.
I had an interview, and one of the interviewers asking for company culture said, "Are you a driver or a passenger?" And I said, "I know what you're getting at, and I think I know what answer you want to hear, but I'm going to throw a different one at you." So I'm into cars. I'm into car racing, and I'm actually thinking about this more from kind of the position of a rally car situation. And I would say I am a co-pilot, and because I don't believe in the idea that the manager is making all of the decisions, right? Not like, I think my camera dropped. I shall fix that. But
your audio is good.
Yeah, sweet. So yeah, I mean, I don't believe the manager should be the person making all of these decisions. I think they should be good decision makers.
Right.
And so, the co-pilot is there to help the drivers, the people executing, to prepare for obstacles up ahead, right? Prepare for the turns in the road, have done the prep work, help them make decisions in the moment, and we get there together. And I thought that was like, I don't know. I think a lot about this idea that like managers need to be the smartest person in the room. I engaged with someone in the LinkedIn comment conversation back and forth the other day. I think we were discussing Twitter's expectation that managers are going to write code. And this person said, well, yeah, managers have been practicing that skill for years. They should be the best. And I kind of was like, I disagree with that. I don't think managers have been practicing that for years. They're not the strongest coders in the room all the time. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And so I just said, I think it is, the value is underestimated to have someone in the room who has more of the experience and skill set to drive to decisions without necessarily being the person who has all the information, right? You're the information gatherer and the guider, but you're not the the person who has the all knowing being in the room, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think you've used the word oracle before. But yeah, I mean I mean I fully agree with that. And certainly like I love to code, but I could tell you that if I had to jump in and anything that my team is coding at work, like for sure, like no, I I think Copilot is such a good way to put that. Like, I'm happy to help them navigate any challenges that they're up against. But yeah, they're the ones executing, and it kind of bringing it back to like uncertainty and stuff too, right? Like, two things come up there. One is like I can offer perspective on information that I have to help provide guidance, but at the same time, like teaching them like basically exactly what I'm doing. Like I just have information and here's how I'm navigating it. You're like showing them or giving them the opportunity to try it. Like here's a few pieces of information that I have. Graeme, as you put it, like, what do you think? Like letting them kind of step through it, like, is really cool because maybe they come up with something different. That's awesome. I mean, if we come up with the same thing, then obviously it's the right answer. But no, but when they have that opportunity to think through something, and just have that opportunity to chat with you through it, through things that maybe have some uncertainty, I think it's pretty interesting because they can come up with their own clarity there.
Yeah, someone that I spoke with years ago called it ignorance as a service, and I just really I love that. It stuck with me.
Yeah,
like I'm a really good. Consider me dumber than you. I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and through asking questions, we can drive to clarity.
Yeah, so I guess good managers are lazy and ignorant is the two things that I'm learning so far this year.
Yeah, right. That's the headline.
Next time I'm applying for jobs and stuff, I'll make sure that I tune up my resume to say that right at the top. The laziest and most ignorant manager
you could ever want.
Yeah. Yeah, well, maybe I'll avoid that, but.
So our platform doesn't let me switch devices during recording, even though I have a backup camera.
Okay.
So,
well, we can press kind of pause here in terms of our conversation. We're live.
For the second time. Yeah. So, I mean, we didn't come into this knowing what exactly we were going to talk about, but maybe it's worth recapping where we got to.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So there are layoffs going on. It sucks. It sucks pretty bad. Right. I think there's, a whole lot of it going around. In terms of, advice, probably not a lot to be given there, but a really good reminder that being involved in a layoff should not impact it's going to impact confidence. I think that's just a plus. The same way every time I screw up something with my son, it impacts my confidence as a parent, even though I know, right? Like he gets upset because he's a toddler, not because I'm a terrible parent. So
right. And it doesn't matter how often people say, "Oh, like don't worry," like it's going to happen where you're going to feel it personally. Like obviously try not to, but it's way easier said than done, of course.
Yeah. But I think what's important is that everyone knows they are, valuable individuals, and this is a crappy situation that happens. And I hope, it ends up in everyone ends up in a better situation as a result of it. I know that feels like a crappy sentiment during, but maybe afterwards. And then I think that that really just that conversation led us into discussions about managing with empathy, compassion, and trust,
and navigating uncertainty, right? Like how do you kind of bridge those two things together when there is uncertainty? Like, do you all of a sudden flip all of your managing style to like overcompensate for the things are uncertain, like let me go figure that out, or can you still lean into some of these like these practices that that you do as a manager to cover scenarios like this? And I think I feel like we've arrived at like, look, there's stuff that we do regularly, hopefully as good leaders, that ties right into like trying to navigate uncertainty. Like, of course, it's like, especially when it comes to layoffs and a lot of what's going on in general for tech, it's not easy. No one's saying it's easy. It's not gonna feel fair, and no one's saying that either. Um, but there are a lot of what I would say are just good practices and skills and behaviors as leaders that we can lean into, um, to help navigate, with others that as we're going through this. And also, I wanted to mention this to you because it was very relevant for some of the conversations we've been having, but doing planning right now with one of my teams for what we'll be focused on in the new year. And this is my newer team. And my newer team has gone through a transition where they had members of their existing team. They kind of like did a over time, like a split to some different area. And I guess they would argue, because I didn't have the context, but I think they would argue that a lot of like their like core members or some like the tribal knowledge and like expertise had kind of moved to that other team. So I've inherited this team, all awesome people, and they're kind of in this position where like they now have to become the experts, right? And as we're going through planning, usually what we like, at least for me, I like to be able to talk about metrics and say, cool, if we're making OKRs, like what do we got going on? What are our really important like service metrics that we care about? Where are they at? And what should we try to drive them to? And the conversation's kind of like, it's not that things are bad, but like people just seem to know the state of things because they've been working in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really interesting opportunity to be like, cool, like guess what? Like for what we're focused on for our next planning is establishing all of those metrics. And it took a little bit of conveying that to people, but I already had people on the team being like, we kind of do this back and forth planning where we want feedback from the engineers and stuff on the team. Like, what are the focus areas that we should be driving in? And I've had people saying like, we should not be going to build more on top of this until we understand like what is our baseline for reliability? What is our baseline for like getting its deployment? So getting builds deployed in time. And it was like, yes, like they don't know what the numbers are right now, but like they know that, and they feel this is like critical for us to be able to keep going. So the metrics just came full circle.
Nice.
But yeah, I was happy about that.
There'll be more follow-up as we see how it goes.
Yeah. It better go, I hope.